I had tried to leave, but the doors were locked. By now, I was already in the security office, trying to find someone to open the door for me. The museum was closed. The security footage showed all areas of the building, and on one of the screens, I saw myself in the medieval gallery, leaning toward a glass case. Behind me, there was a man. I had not seen anyone near me when I was there. He was standing less than a foot away from me on the screen. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the camera. On the monitor, I straightened up from the display case. I remembered checking the time on my phone and deciding to head back toward the entrance. The version of me stepped away from the case and walked toward the doorway. I watched myself leave the gallery on the screen. The man did not move. He stood there, looking at the camera. Then he moved. He took a step forward. He was so close now that I could see him clearly. His skin looked pale under the gallery lights, almost drained of color. His eyes did not blink. They were dark, completely dark, without reflection, fixed on the lens. The medieval gallery feed cut to black. The other screens continued showing empty galleries. I heard a footstep from the corridor outside the security office. It was not loud. It was steady. The kind of step made by someone walking without hesitation. It came from inside the medieval gallery. I stayed where I was, listening. Another step followed, still inside the gallery. Same pace, same weight. I looked back at the monitor. The medieval gallery feed was still black. The other screens showed empty corridors and silent rooms. A third step sounded from inside the gallery, closer to the doorway now. I stepped out of the security office and into the corridor. The entrance to the medieval gallery was visible at the far end. The medieval gallery feed on the monitor was still black. The rest of the building remained still. I walked toward the doorway. The corridor lights hummed overhead. The gallery beyond it looked dimmer than before. I stopped at the threshold and looked inside. The benches were empty. The glass cases reflected the ceiling lights in long, straight lines. For a moment, that was all I saw. Then I saw a shadow crossing the glass. I lifted my eyes from the case. He was standing in the middle of the room, facing the doorway, facing me. He simply stood there, watching. For a moment, neither of us moved, and the gallery felt wider than it had before. The air settled around the display cases. He began walking toward me at a steady pace. I stepped back into the corridor while keeping my eyes on him, increasing my pace as he continued forward and closed the distance between us. When I turned fully into the hallway, his footsteps followed behind me, even and controlled, echoing against the stone floor. I moved down the corridor without taking my eyes off him. The older wing opened to my right. I turned into it. The lighting grew dimmer as I passed beneath it. The reconstructed rooms opened one after another, narrow passages connecting them. I moved through the first chamber and into the next. The air felt cooler there. I heard his steps enter the room behind me. They were steady, unhurried. I crossed into another passage and reached for the next door. It did not open. I pulled again. The handle stayed fixed. His steps entered the room behind me. I turned. He was standing in the doorway now, closer than before. He stepped into the chamber. He walked the same way he had in the gallery, one step at a time, without changing pace. I backed away until I felt the wall behind me. There was another door to my left. I reached for it. The handle turned. I pulled it open and stepped through. The corridor beyond was narrower and darker. I walked down the passage, my footsteps echoing sharply in the narrow space. His footsteps followed behind me, evenly spaced. I reached the end of the passage and pushed the next door, It did not open. I tried again. The handle stayed fixed. His steps entered the corridor behind me. I turned. He was halfway down the passage. I turned back to the metal door beneath the exit sign and gripped the handle again. It turned under my hand, and the door opened just enough to let a strip of cold air reach my face. I pushed harder, trying to widen the gap, but it stopped after a few inches. The frame rattled when I forced it. It did not move any farther. I tried again, shifting my weight into it. The opening stayed narrow. The stairwell beyond was visible through the gap, but the space was too tight to slip through. I turned slowly. He was closer now. There were only a few steps between us. The exit sign above me hummed faintly. The light flickered once, then steadied. He stopped a short distance away and looked at me the same way he had looked at the camera. My back was still against the door. He stood a few steps away, close enough that I could see the pale tone of his skin under the corridor light. I did not move. My hand was still on the exit handle. The light above the sign flickered once. The corridor went dark for a moment. When the light came back, my eyes shifted to the wall beside the door. There was a small framed plaque mounted there, the kind the museum used for staff history and internal notes. I had not noticed it before. I read it. Night Watchman, 1872. Found deceased in lower storage corridor. Beneath the text was a photograph. It was him. The same face, the same dark clothing, the same still expression. I looked back at him. He had not moved. My hand tightened on the handle. I pulled. This time the door opened. The gap widened enough for me to turn sideways and force myself through. The edge of the metal frame pressed against my shoulder as I slipped into the stairwell. Cold air moved around me. I took the steps quickly, gripping the rail as I climbed. The outer door at the top stood closed. I reached it and pushed. It opened. The street outside was still active. Cars passed. A couple stood near the curb waiting to cross. The sound of traffic filled the air. I stepped onto the pavement. For a moment, I just stood there. The museum behind me looked the same as it had earlier in the evening. The windows reflected the streetlights. I turned back toward the entrance. He was standing just inside, beyond the glass, facing me. His expression had not changed. A bus passed between us, blocking my view for a second. When it cleared, the entrance stood empty. The museum doors remained closed. I turned away from the entrance and walked toward the underground station. The streets were busy, traffic moving steadily, people crossing at the lights without looking at me. By the time I reached the station, the noise of the city had settled into something ordinary again. I went down the escalator with the others, stood on the platform, and boarded the train when it arrived. When my stop came, I stepped off and followed the signs toward the exit. The stairwell ahead was lit by bright overhead lights, the steps worn smooth in the center. I moved up with the rest of the crowd. Halfway up, I looked toward the top. He was standing there, looking at me. The light went dark.